Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark LaLiberty, and joining me today is...
Corey, it's fine, not Griner.
Because everything is fine?
Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Do you want to enter that sensitive information into ChatGPT to check its validity?
That'd be fine.
On today's episode,
It's fine.
It is fine. We'll discuss a recent data security issue from our good friends at CISA. We'll go over some in-depth vulnerability analysis for a couple of issues in SolarWinds Web Help Desk server. And then we will end with a look back to something we talked about, 6 years ago, I think, and give some closure on a couple of penetration testers that were arrested after doing their job.
I'm glad we're saving the good news for the end.
Yeah. With that, let's go ahead and, generate our way in. So to start, Corey, I think you're the one that drew this to my attention this last week, but Politico published an article where they had talked to 4 Department of Homeland Security officials who claimed that the acting interim head of CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency here in the US, was caught uploading sensitive contractual documents into the public version of ChatGPT over the summer. Now, real quick aside, that should be obvious, I think, to everyone who uses ChatGPT or has been at least not under a rock for the last 3 years. But anything you put in the public version of ChatGPT is now in OpenAI's hands. They have access to it and they use it for training data. So obviously you probably don't want to put sensitive, or thankfully not top secret in this case, but at least sensitive information in there because it can become a part of the training set.
People should have learned this by now with every social media network. If it is free, it's not really free. Anything you give it is... if you look at the EULA, is basically open property for them to use how they want. ChatGPT and Facebook and the other things may not say this, but your pictures can become their pictures for their advertising. Your private information can be sold to whatever firm wants to market to you or send you political news or target botnets towards you. So yeah, if you use free ChatGPT, not only are you kind of getting 2 years old information because they don't give you the one that's trained on the latest stuff. And this goes for probably every other LLM too. You really shouldn't trust it with the data you give it. That's why, by the way, we do like AI here at WatchGuard. We like AI innovation, but one of our own policies here is, other than AI tools that we've gone through a lot of testing, we have special enterprise and data licenses with, if you're going to use public ones, you can only share public data with them. So just a good reminder, regardless of this story. But let's keep going and learning more. What did he share?
Well, and then real quick, we've even seen research in the last couple of years where you can extract information back out of the training set. Like Google's DeepMind team, 2 years ago, I think, did a research post where they found that they just told it to repeat the word poem for to infinity. It would eventually get bored and just start spitting out training excerpts.
I think you first used that as a sample in one of our threats, presentations.
Yep.
Last week on Thursday, when this story came out, there's another story. I can't remember the exact name of Chatbot AI or something. It was one of those third-party services that essentially takes a lot of LLMs and packages the free ones together and sells you something. But they apparently didn't have good security, and people were able to get millions of users' prompts, everything they were asking this chatbot stuff. I saw another story that was a toy that people could talk to, and basically same thing. Weaknesses in the security allowed someone to find every single exact detail of the chat that the kid had, including where the kid lived, the kid's age, blah, blah, blah. So
awesome.
I would not share anything sensitive with a public free tool on the internet ever.
Well, unfortunately for CISA and the fine people of the United States, Mr. Madhu Gaudamakala, who is the acting director of CISA, When he first joined up back in, I think, May, requested special permission from CISA's chief information officer to use ChatGPT, which at the time, and I think still currently, was blocked from all other Department of Homeland Security uh, employees because it's public and because risks from data loss and AI are real. But they got a special dispensation and an exception in this
I
case.
think he even, I think he cited, I'm not sure if it's in the article, if I can remember, but he cited one of Trump's executive actions that basically talks about the innovative use of AI, and you can't really do anything to slow down the use of innovation AI in the United States. So that was one of the tools that go to Mukala, go to Makala. You probably, I suck at pronouncing that. You did a great job. But one of the ways he used to get the permission to use ChatGPT, I believe.
Which, if I was the CIO at that time, I'd say, great, expensive $10 a month subscription for the paid one. And that way, at least our data is under some sort of data protection. Or even better, use one of our authorized AI chatbots that keeps government data within the network. But
yeah.
Anyways, we'll talk more about that a little bit later too. But so with their access to ChatGPT in just a few short months, they said they uploaded contract documentation to the chatbot, presumably to gain some insight on it, that were marked as for official use only. It's not technically a classification like secret material in the US, but it is a designation for information that's considered sensitive and not for public release and not for uploading to public AI chatbots. The DHS whistleblowers that were talking to Politico said that they detected the uploads through their cybersecurity sensors. They had multiple warnings in the first week of August alone from this activity. The DHS now has their own AI chatbot. It's called the DHS Chat, which is configured to prevent queries and uploaded documents from leaving federal networks, which I think should have been requirement number one. And the whistleblowers did say that Mr. Gadumakala, I think that's it, had meetings with CISA's chief information officer and chief counsel and around the July timeframe after the incident to talk about proper handling and official use for only materials, which coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, he tried to fire the CIO shortly afterwards and was only stopped by a few other appointees at the department. Corey, there's a bit to unpack here, but I think let's pause for a second on the politics and just talk about like data security for a second. Like anything you upload to a public model becomes public. And it sounds like
most likely
CISA and the DHS actually had guardrails in place to block access to some of these public models.
It was clear that before the change in administration, CISA was worried about this and thought about this. So, not an attack at all the people. We believe CISA was a good organization doing good for the United States government and the United States citizens on trying to bring cybersecurity to the forefront. And it's clear they understood it and had rules against this. One thing to be clear, by the way, is, and I think CISA agrees, is it's not trying to block AI innovation. We all realize the power there, but AI is dependent on big data. AI gets its power from having access to all the data it can. And that's why companies that sell AI for profit have a motive to suck in and use as much of the data as they're allowed to. And their free mechanisms are how they're going to do that. So the main concern here isn't, oh, don't use AI to process data at an organization. It's freaking useful. I don't think we'd ever cite any leader or president of organization for trying to use these tools. It's just, hey, you're dealing with sensitive government information in some cases. Let's avoid letting that get out to the public. You should be using much more secured AI, which it sounds like CISA has now, and CISA was trying to control before.
Like the second piece of this is like called the risk from executive exemptions too, where sometimes folks will come in and say, no, I know better. I choose to ignore that. And then it does actually come to manifest into a problem for the organization. And I don't know, maybe I had a higher hope for the organization responsible for securing our federal networks here in the US and federal civilian agencies. But kind of sucks seeing that get
Yeah.
used and then turns out caused an issue.
Yeah. Yep.
But
C'est la vie.
either
But
way,
there's a practical takeaway for everybody else. Just beware of this with your company. You should, if you're not using AI now, you should. You're going to need to. The cat's out of the bag. Pandora's box is open. It is a valuable tool with some limits. It has issues too, but it's a valuable tool, whether you like it or dislike it, or no matter what it does to the world. But there's dangers here, and it's good to make profit. It's good to move fast. It's good to try to take leader first mover advantage of technology. But security isn't trying to de-innovate or block innovation. We're just letting you know that you may be doing a lot of things fast now that make you crash a year from now when all of your data gets out in threat actors or even other people's hands that may not like what you're doing.
Yep. And if you don't already have an AI governance policy in this case, like now's the time to get something put out there. Because a lot of times, like users just need guidance. They aren't out there to intentionally go screw the company by uploading data all over the place. And education and some guidance and guardrails can go a long ways to helping enable teams to adopt AI rapidly while still protecting the company and protecting
They want to
data.
use cool tools that make their life easier. So there's nothing wrong with even this guy wanting to use a tool that makes his life more efficient and easier. It's all about doing it in a way that doesn't screw you in the end.
Yep. Well said, Corey. So moving on. Now, the second report I wanted to talk about came from our friends at Horizon 3 AI again. I think we just talked to them about them last week, right? Where they
recently
published some details on a handful of vulnerabilities that they found in SolarWinds Web Help Desk server that were just patched last week. There was a combination of three. There was an unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability from deserialization. There's a static credential that granted limited authenticated access, and then a security protection bypass on some of the site actions. But funny enough, the story actually starts way back in August of 2024. SolarWinds published CVE 2024 28986, which is a deserialization vulnerability in their Ajax proxy, so a part of their web server in this case, that could grant remote code execution. That was quickly added to CISA's known exploited vulnerability catalog at the time too, like very quickly. A couple months later,
probably
they
because
published.
I'm sure everyone remembers SolarWinds is the one that had a breach and a Trojanized version of Orion back in the day. At least the good news so far is these are vulnerabilities that are being found before threat actors exploit them.
A couple months later, though, they published CVE 2024 28988 to resolve a bypass in that patch. And then in September of last year, they published CVE 2025 26399 to cover another bypass. And this is where Horizon 3's report comes in, where they discover and disclose another bypass, this time chaining multiple vulnerabilities together to still attack that same Ajax proxy endpoint.
They seem to have some humor. Yo, dog, we heard you like patch bypasses.
Exactly. So this all starts, though, with one CVE, 2025 40537, that static credential issue, where when you first set up this help desk server, when it initializes, it creates a client account for demo purposes. It's got the username client and the password client, and that is hard-coded in the application. Now, it's supposed to be limited for just like demo purposes in the UI. It's supposed to have limited permissions. Horizon 3 actually found multiple instances where it was associated with the default tech account, which granted anyone logging in with those credentials access to the administrator account. So that on its own is a bit bad news bears. The second issue they found, though, so this can get a bit technical, so we'll try and stay at the 30,000 foot level. But this help desk server is built using Java web objects, a popular way to build web applications, at least maybe 20 years ago, and some of these applications are still living on to this day. Everything on a web page is a component or part of a component, and those components are only created like in memory on the system and accessible when a valid session tries to access a page that has one of them. So when a user visits like the login page, for example, a session is created for that user, and it instantiates the components required for that login page and only that login page. The components show up in the URL that the user is browsing to as a string of just integers and periods on the end of it. So in their example, they showed when you go to the login page, it instantiates components 6 and 7, or at least in the index there, the number 6.7. After logging in, other components will be instantiated and their identifiers get added to the URL too. So in their example, after logging in and then presumably going to like a dashboard, your little string of loaded components gets even larger in that case. So this means that the URL is like unique and it's dynamic. It's all based off of the components the user is accessing as it navigates around in the UI. And it means in order to access a very specific component, like the Ajax proxy, for example, you need to know all of the prior components leading up to it. It makes it a bit of a pain in the butt to try and get to it, long story short.
I was going to say, so far, it does sound like trying to secure, like a privilege-based design where a session is only getting access to what it should so far. They
found, though, there's one query parameter. So on the URL, sometimes when you go to a website, you'll see a question mark followed by a key equals value parameter. You can have multiple parameters separated by an ampersand, the at symbol, or and symbol, rather. They found one specific query parameter called WO page, which creates these web object components just on the fly using just the component name. So you don't need to go through the process of trying to like reverse engineer your way into a URL that's got the right path to get to what you're wanting to. If you want to load up a component called login pref, you just have to pass in a URL parameter called WO page equals login pref. Now there's some protections on this case in the application, including some cross-site request forgery protections to prevent you from abusing components to make web requests internally to other components. For example, if the URL has the letters WO in it, then it goes through this validation. It checks the CSRF tokens, make sure the parameters are even allowed by like an explicit allow list. Like there's a lot of sanitization and protection that goes in here, but they found they could bypass it just by including a string in the URL /Ajax/ anywhere in the request. So that meant they can add on a just bogus URI request parameter in this case, like banana equals /Ajax/, followed by the legitimate parameter WO page equals login pref, for example, which would bypass that sanitization and let them load up that object on the server, which ultimately creates an instance of this Ajax proxy component that they want to go try and exploit again because they suspect there may be other issues in it after all of the patched vulnerabilities in recent years. So that was still a bit technical, but long story short, now they've got an unauthenticated way to gain access to that potentially vulnerable component. In there's some other functionality, including a way to handle file uploads from the user. There's some sanitization on there as well too, but they found they could bypass that sanitization pretty easily just by calling different components directly. There was also like a whitelisting function that even had like a misspelling in it, which was kind of funny, but they found they could bypass that pretty easily too by just like prepending their payload with a whole bunch of keywords that sanitization thing's looking for. So they found a way to establish a valid session and extract like key values, create that login pref component by tampering with the URL, set the state of that component to let them access the file upload mechanism in it, then abuse this JSON RPC bridge, basically taking the web input from the user and turning it, deserializing it into a Java object behind the scenes. And then they found a way to trigger that object, giving them code execution. They didn't share the whole proof of concept, but they did share a limited proof of concept that shows like using the Java native directory integration to go do a lookup on a remote server. They provided some IOCs as well too. And then the timeline was actually pretty good. They reported this to SolarWinds on December 5th. and it was patched just last week on January 28th. So about 60 days, which beats the 90-day typical disclosure timeline most folks aim for. But long story short, if you've got a SolarWinds Web Help Desk server floating around somewhere on your network, make sure you patch to resolve these vulnerabilities. And some more cool research from the folks at Horizon 3 AI. I'm looking forward to the fifth bypass of this in another year or two, I suppose.
Hopefully SolarWinds finds it on their own and makes Horizon AI work for what the next thing they find.
But one of the common classes, and it's even in the OWASP top 10 of web vulnerabilities, are deserialization issues, where you're accepting pretty complex input from a user and then trying to turn it into an actual like programming object that could just be like a bunch of variables. It could be something that could execute too. And so I don't know, if you are a web developer listening to this, make sure you're paying attention to the OWASP top 10 and specifically look for these types of issues, especially in Java-based applications where they seem to be rampant. But yeah, cool research.
Yep.
So moving on to the last story, this one, so back in 2020, Corey, you and I did some like Black Hat recap podcast episodes and even videos at the time, almost live from Las Vegas. And one of the talks that I remember bringing up was called we went to Iowa and all we got were these felony arrest records. And it was led by Gary DeMarcurio. Oh man, I'm butchering names. I'm so sorry. And Justin Wynn, who at the time they worked for Coalfire as penetration testers. And
well respected, by the way, or well known, at least pen testing organization.
Yeah, exactly. I know at least Gary
always played by the book.
Yeah. Gary moved on to another. I think he founded his own company now, Kaiju Security. There's a Watch Guardian alumni there that I respect a lot too. So shout out to them. But at the time, they were up on stage talking about how they were hired by Iowa's judicial branch to conduct penetration tests, which included physical security checks of 5 different locations around the state of Iowa. And one of their targets was the Dallas County Courthouse, where when they went to go do their physical penetration tests, they were authorized to go after hours. They showed up sometime around midnight or so, found a unlocked door at the perimeter, first locked it, and then lock-picked it to prove that they could open it to get through it. They ultimately, within their triggered an alarm. They tried like the default codes to try and disarm it, couldn't disarm the alarm, and some deputies showed up pretty quickly. To which point, these 2 penetration testers pulled out their signed contract.
Jail free. Look at
their get out of jail free card
to do this.
Exactly, with like contact information from the people who authorized it. The deputies like cross-referenced it, called up the folks that authorized it, confirmed that it was all good, and they were going to let them go. But they ended up sitting around and like they stayed, the penetration testers, and just chatted with the deputies for a bit because they wanted to go through, like the deputies were curious about their life and jobs as penetration testers. They wanted to hear some of the war stories from it. And while they were sitting there talking with these deputies, the county sheriff showed up. And he ultimately decided that the judicial branch did not have jurisdiction over the courthouse, which is an interesting assumption on its own. And he ended up arresting them, where they spent a day in jail. I think they got out on like $50,000 bond at the time. And then they were being prosecuted for basically burglary, breaking and entering into this courthouse unauthorized. At one point, I remember I took a note that the county offered them an immunity deal in exchange for testifying against the state. So it sounded like the sheriff was trying to, like, I don't know, he was pissed off at the state and trying to go after them at some point. But ultimately, the charges were dropped because they should be. They were penetration testers authorized by the people that were actually responsible for this jurisdiction. And thankfully for them, these 2 penetration testers ended up suing the county for wrongful imprisonment, false arrest, defamation, a whole bunch of other stuff. And just last week, we got a happy ending where 5 days prior to the case going to trial, Dallas County offered to settle for $600,000. So, hey, this is good. This is happy news for them. Like they should not have been arrested. This sounded like a sheriff that just, I don't know, woke up on the wrong side of the bed at 11 o'clock and had a bone to pick. Maybe was
I wish
not
I
happy
knew
with some people at the state.
like the drama here. There's something that the state thought is going on at this place versus the sheriff who's like literally going against something the state sanctioned on one of their own courtrooms. So it's I agree. This ended the exact right way. Either way, these legitimate, hired, doing their job with the right authority guys should never have been in the middle of whatever the sheriff versus the state was arguing about. But
Yeah.
yeah, I wish I knew why. I mean, why is it just the sheriff waking up on the wrong side of the bed, or is there something going on?
And even though they were like ultimately let go, charges dropped, like the arrest record itself is still an issue. Like, first off, reputation is important in this space, and getting arrested just it means you have to explain it at that point. It also just like in terms of like practical impacts, like if you go for TSA pre-check or global entry here in the US, often an arrest record can be disqualifying from that as well too. So there is a like not just the night in jail, there's longer term impacts from this also. So it sucks that it happened to them, even if they got a good outcome out of it. But like one talking point I wanted to mention here was so this was a penetration test that was like purchased for the contract was with the state, and it was going against some county buildings in this case. And I do think maybe there was a opportunity for the state to have a little more like inform some of the other stakeholders involved. Like I would it's a penetration test. You shouldn't tell all of the deputies in that courthouse when someone's going to show up to test their security. That's not how you do a penetration test. But maybe tell the like effective CEO of the courthouse, the sheriff in this case, hey, there's going to be a penetration test at some point in the next month, to give them a heads up. I feel like some of this could have been prevented with a little bit more communication from like the folks that actually purchased the penetration test in this case, and maybe the two from Coalfire could have avoided a lot of this trouble too. I don't know.
Yeah, I
But
definitely think they should let somebody know. Like we red team, you have plans to continue red teaming our organization, and you always have one, like some leader in the know, so that if it does trigger something, and the employees that don't know freak out, they can have at least one person that says, "Oh no, this is expected." So I agree with you there. But I wonder if it has something to do with the state not trusting the security of the courthouse for I'm trying to remember what other story this story wasn't just on Ars Technica, it was all over the place. And I recall reading something about they had security concerns about this particular courthouse. So
I mean, they showed up and the door was open and unlocked at 11 o'clock at
yeah,
night.
maybe
And
there's a reason that they didn't want the courthouse to know, because there were already conflicts about, whoever was in charge saying things are fine, leave us alone. But I don't know. Either way, it seems kind of silly. It's while you should always have someone in the know to help you out, help your pen testers out in the case that they're caught by an employee. I think they wasted a lot of time and even taxpayer money with the court systems by blaming these pen testers instead of talking to each other.
yeah, $600,000 of Iowa taxpayer money to
And the
put it
time in
bluntly.
court and the judge's time and the deputies that got called and the sheriff and the people at the jail, the day, like it's waste of money.
Yep. But hey, happy ending for the penetration testers, and I hope they go on to have a
It is
continued
important for
successful
the
career.
security community. Pen tests are important, and I think the big thing that both of these pen testers commented on is this could have chilling repercussions if you start arresting people that are in legal pen tests. If you have a legal organization, like a top organization that says they can break into any building and do whatever they want at all times, but then they don't let other organizations test the security of things, it's a heyday for vulnerabilities everywhere. So you can't not let security professionals have an option to help show you your weaknesses and help you fix them.
Yep, well said. I don't know about you, Corey. I feel like I could never be a physical penetration tester. Like I would get so much anxiety leading up to trying to like social engineer someone in person. I could send
Uh,
phishing emails all day if it came to it, but walking into a desk and pretending
I'm
like
with
I
you.
belong there,
I
I
think
couldn't do it.
for non-in-person social engineering, we all know some psychology there, but it definitely takes, uh, you know, braver something. I don't want to say the word I was going to say to show up and pretend you own the place and be in the
Cojones.
alley, cojones. Well, that's the same word. If like it's still inappropriate if someone speaks Spanish,
Uh-huh.
but yes, those. Or dumpster diving around people or lock
I could
picking.
never do it.
Yeah, I prefer behind a keyboard in a terminal.
You and me both. That is for sure. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can reach out to us on Blue Sky. I'm at itsmark.me. Corey's at SecAdept. And we're both on Instagram at watchguard_technologies. You can also probably find our emails too if you want to send a nice note. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.